You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners.
Welcome to this episode of the Be Better Off Show. And what's this show about? This is to help private business owners who want to be healthier, wealthier, wiser, and to remember to have some fun. And so today we've got one of Australia's leading gallerists, Michael Reid from Michael Reid Gallery. He is a leading authority on contemporary art, and I'll ask him to tell us more about him. But Michael's a great friend of ours, and I'm really pleased to have him with us. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning from Murrurundi.
How are you?
Good. It's a great morning, actually. I said before we basically went on air, I like autumn. It's one of the most consistent times of the year, and it's beautiful. When the sun comes out, it's actually sparkling in the morning.
Yeah, it's a great time of year. Now, Murrurundi is up near Newcastle?
No, Scone. We're about 20 minutes from Scone. We're at the end of the Hunter Valley, so we're at the end of the horse industry, the vineyards, and we also have the coal mines kind of to the northwest of us as well. Okay,
great. Well, why don't I start there? Because Michael's got his galleries in Sydney and in Germany. Whereabouts in Germany is your gallery?
In Berlin, in Ackerstrasse, which is the old East Germany, near a place called Prenzlauberg.
Okay, and then in Murrurundi.
Yes.
Share with us, share the story. Where did you grow up? How did you come to be in art?
I grew up in Narrandera, so it's a very small town in kind of the Western Riverina. And I'm now 58, and I knew that I always wanted to go back to the world that I grew up in. And not retirement, but I've always enjoyed living in a country town. I consider myself a product of a country town. So when my wife's great-great-great-grandfather's house came up for sale through the family about 15 years ago, we purchased it. So we moved here about 15 years ago as a holiday house. And then I realised for me to enjoy a holiday, I actually had to do something. So I started the gallery, and in small baby steps have developed the gallery in Murrurundi as a product of A, me wanting to live in the country, and B, me wanting to do something and make a living while living in the country. Yeah. I have the headquarters, the engine room of the business is in Surrey Hills, Sydney. And, you know, that is ably run by my colleagues. And essentially, we've always worked at a distance, you know, because I've always worked between Berlin, Murrurundi, Sydney. I travel an enormous lot. I've got a big client base in Melbourne, Perth and Brisbane. So, you know, in any one year, I used to catch the plane, you know, 35, 45 times a year. You know, I'm used to working at a distance, and so it was very easy for us to maintain this structure and, in fact, grow within this environment because we all do what we do from different places.
Yep. And then, Michael, how did you come to have a gallery in Germany?
Well, Germany is interesting in the fact that I went to Germany in 2011, and it was very, very obvious that the world was going through a cataclysmic change and that something had to be done. And I am of the belief that, a bit like Alice in Wonderland, that comment, you have to run forward so as not to walk backwards. And actually, Robert Holmes à Court, and I don't want to drop a name, but he actually said that to me one day when I was a whippersnapper working for Christie's. And, you know, you have to run forward. And I knew that if I didn't expand in the recession, that I would go under. And Berlin is the contemporary art capital of Europe. Paris is fashion, Milan is design, Hamburg is shipping, Frankfurt is finance, Stuttgart is, you know, like cities in Europe tend to have a particular focus. Yeah. The focus for Berlin is contemporary art. So, and I have a very big German heritage background. So I wanted to combine where I wanted to live and who I was with this notion that we needed to expand, and Berlin is the place you show contemporary art in Europe. So it made a sensible decision in that respect.
Okay, and so here you are, an Australian. Do you have a German passport or?
No, I don't. I was.
How do you start a business in Germany?
Look, it's really easy. In Germany, the big things are really easy and the small things are really hard. So you can go and live and start a business in Germany just as you can in West Wyalong or Adelaide or Perth. You know, it's not hard. But getting the internet on in Germany I had to eventually call the Australian ambassador and have them intervene with the German telecommunications company. The small things in Germany are so German, and the big things are so international. When you go and get a mobile phone plan in Germany, I took a German speaker with me. It took most of the day, and we stamped every single piece of paper known to humanity 5 times. We even stamped blank pieces of paper. You know, it got to the point where you were just wielding a stamp like this weapon, because the Germans are so efficient. You know, so much bureaucracy. And the thing I learned about Germany is, if someone doesn't know you, they revert to about 5 meters of bureaucracy. But if they get on with you, it's cut through in a second. And that's the beauty of their system. Their system is highly organised and bureaucratic for most things all the time. But if you know someone and they trust you, it's down to happening absolutely instantly. So it's easy to actually start a business in Germany, particularly Berlin. I don't speak German. I can only be polite. You know, pass me a beer. Can I have a white wine? You know, who's got a cigarette? You know, that kind of thing. But everyone speaks English. So starting in Germany was really beneficial. I'd hate to have I had the opportunity to start in London, and I'm so glad I didn't. Germany, it was, and then particularly very inexpensive.
Yeah.
So to employ someone in Germany is easy. To actually rent a property is very easy. It's just every now and then the little things which we take for granted become incredibly hard. And that's when you notice that you're actually not in Australia.
And the flight, you fly direct to Berlin and you enjoy the German food and...
Oh, I love it. I fly less because I have 2 really good colleagues in Germany and they don't need me sitting on their shoulder. Yeah. I also have colleagues in Sydney where it's good for them to fly. They're younger, so they like to fly economy. They think that's actually fun. So it's cheaper to send my colleagues. It also spreads the love and allows everyone to actually... Yeah, and we just had a big German exchange in March where, in fact, my German colleagues came to Sydney and my Sydney colleagues went to Germany. The flying I like less and less. So, in fact, instead of going 4 times a year, now I go once. Last year I didn't go at all. And I tend to go for a minimum of 6 weeks. 2 months is, you know, I like to go and I like to stay. And I would live in Berlin if I could tomorrow.
Yeah, fantastic. So talk to us about art, contemporary art. What is it as a business? How does the business work? There's a mystery. It's
a mystery because I'm highly educated, as most people in my industry are. I think I've got 5 degrees. I'm highly educated and I've worked in many different things. I've started life as a jackaroo at Haddon Rig in Warren. My dad was a farm machinery dealer and I grew up in Narrandera. So I started working on the land. And then I went, obviously had a lot of education, and then I went to Christie's in London and walked in and asked for a job. And they gave me a job, which was incredible.
What did you study at that point, Michael?
History, law, politics, economics, very general kind of stuff. But law, I guess, was the law at Sydney University, where I did a really good course on slavery, on Roman law, which was actually one of the most interesting things I did. Law is a very good discipline. You know, the concept that a form of study is an intellectual discipline does apply to law. So although I did practice for a short period of time and I have no intention of ever practicing again, as a study at Sydney University, it was great to discipline the mind. It was a really good thing to learn to sift, to sort, and to focus. It's a hard course, you know. So I have quite a few academic masters here and all that kind of stuff. But I did agriculture. I've taught at universities. I've worked as a lawyer in criminal law. I've done lots of different things. But nothing has been as complicated or as demanding as actually working in the fine arts.
So you land in London, you go to I'd like a job.
Yep.
What job did you want? What job did you get? And how was it different to what you thought it would be?
I got a job very quickly in London because it was the 80s with Schroders. I was working on doing analysis into the Norwegian shipping into cod, North Sea cod quotas. I have no idea about cod, and I'm actually enumerate, but it was the 80s and everybody got a job. And then I worked for the Royal Bank of Scotland for quite a long time, working in human resources. And I used to walk past Christie's every day, going on the tube from South Kensington. And I walked in one day and I just knew that that was the world for me. And I asked the person at the desk who you wrote to, and I wrote a very assertive letter. Basically, I said that I was fairly bored professionally in London, and if I didn't get a job in the next couple of weeks, I would leave. And I think they actually interviewed me as an anthropological process. I think it was like, who is this guy? I was only the second Australian they'd ever employed.
Yep.
And they asked me, was the University of Sydney a bit like the University of Bombay? And I said, yes, it was. Because that was their only reference, they had no reference. I said that, us and the Indians often shared a common language and a distaste for rice pudding. I hate rice pudding. Anyway, I got a job with Christie's as a porter, carrying things out to cars for people. And from there, you kind of move around all the different departments as a porter. And eventually I got a job as a junior administrator in the book department, and then I was a book cataloguer. And from there I went back to Christie's Australia because Sydney University was actually going to throw me out of law. I had deferred for so many years that they'd said that if I didn't return, it was over. And I come from a family where you do and finish things. So I went back and finished law while I was working at Christie's Australia as well. So my background is in the arts, is Christie's London, and my passion is looking at art through an historical lens, not a visual philosophy lens, but looking at it in terms of a document, like I would look at a book or I would look at an object.
Okay, so a work of art as a reflection of its time and place. And
yeah, and what it says to us about the world we live in or the world we have lived in.
So some people have that thing, they like the visual arts, if you like. What is it in your experience that draws people into the world of collecting, and how do they work with someone like you?
Well, look, there's many ways that we have contact with people who buy. And the most basic way is that they know that they should buy well, but they don't know what they're doing. And I equate that to myself. I don't really enjoy, I don't know anything about cars, but I do know that a BMW is better than a Mazda. So, essentially they are moneyed and they are educated and they know that they should be doing better than they have been doing. So there is that group of people who come to us because they don't want a Mazda, they want a Mercedes.
Yeah.
But in terms of collecting, that's a very different species. That is a person who is looking to create a dialogue and to create some form of narrative within what they do. They want to understand the world they live in or their interests within the world, and they surround themselves with artworks and objects that speak to them about the world. So they create their own story around them. They cloak themselves in an understanding of their world.
And so that's why fashion and art are so closely related, in that fashion is so often a reflection of people's ideas and values and the story that they want to either present or tell about themselves and to themselves. And then art, I've always said that you could walk into someone's house and if they weren't there, as long as you could look in their fridge, look on their bookshelf and look on their walls, you would know something about who that person is and what they value and what excites them. And I think that, to me, that's always been what someone's art.
There is a really great line in the B plus movie, The Devil Wears Prada. That's a really good B plus movie where I think it's Meryl Streep plays Anna Wintour. And her assistant's wearing this very particular blue jumper.
Yeah.
And she's wearing it in a very iconoclastic way, in a very anti-fashion way. She thinks she's being original, and she thinks she's kind of downplaying fashion by wearing this big cable knit blue jumper. And the Anna Wintour figure tears her apart in
Tells her the whole story.
Got it. Yeah. She actually goes, you think you're wearing a blue jumper and you think you're being original and you think you're being anti-fashion. But in 1972, Yves Saint Laurent relaunched this colour, Yves Saint Laurent blue. And this went on to this and this went on to that. And then it was picked up by Coco. It was just, and she put it into context which showed you can both wear the garment and truly understand fashion.
Yeah.
And how a person who can wear the garment doesn't understand fashion. But a connoisseur is Anna Wintour, who actually had an incredible depth of knowledge around a single object, both in a physical sense, but also in an intellectual sense. And that is what a good collector can do.
So in your experience, what have you, running the economics of running a gallery, you find artists to represent whose work you believe in, admire, or think has a future. What's the secret sauce there? And then building a client base. Right now, a lot of clients say, okay, I've got to reinvent my business. I need to grow. I need to stay economically viable. You've done well in gathering a very diverse and large client base. What do you think that, what are some of the practical things that a small business owner can do to grow their client base?
Again, to drop another name, I'm friendly with Jack Cowan, Hungry Jack's. He was a friend of a good friend of mine. And I used to see Jack about once a year. I haven't seen him for a year or so. And we were chatting one day about him getting real estate for Hungry Jack's and all these kind of places. And I said, Jack, how do you run around getting all this stuff? How does someone run around getting a corner block here in West Wyalong? And he goes, Michael, you get to my age and people come to you. And I went, that makes sense. Yeah. So people go to Jack with the business proposition. He doesn't go out looking for it. And in a sense, we sit back and people come to us in terms of their art practice. We're always looking. We're always on the lookout for new things. We do a major call out each year, which no other gallery does, in January, where anyone can send in anything and we will look at it. I think
new artists to seek representation.
And we looked at 750 this January.
Fantastic. So that's the artist side, and then the client side. These collectors that I guess are the lifeblood of the business, or people that want to buy art with you.
Yeah.
Where do you
There's an old kind of book saying that stock is king. And I used to work for Christie's, and our clients, would come to us to buy at Christie's, but we'd also see them buying at Sotheby's, and they would buy. And in the end, people will buy wherever they need to buy the thing they want to buy.
Yeah.
So essentially, we make sure that our stock is king, and then we can deal with people because they will come to us. Me personally, I'm not a great duchesser. I don't actually have the temperament to actually endlessly be diplomatic to people. There's only one black hole in my universe, and that's me, and I suck in everything. I don't have that capacity for endless schmoozing, but I do have the capacity to be very, very good at what I do, and people will overlook all my personality faults to deal with me, knowing they're dealing with a team of very, very good people.
Yeah, so, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, you know what the key to my success has been? One of the great keys to my success? The more I step back from the day-to-day running my business.
Yeah.
I've got a great guy called Toby Ma, who's my right-hand person, and Daniel Soma, who are my right-hand people in Sydney. I couldn't do the business without them. And the moment they take control, the business doubles and triples and quadruples. Yeah. I'm very, very good at what I do.
Yeah, so the combination of a team.
Yeah, it's about a team. And, as you know, a good idea is cheap. It's the implementation of the good idea. So, what we do, I suppose, we're very, very good. And so the artists come to us. We are good at what we do, and we are selling good things, so the clients come to us. And in terms of the interfacing and the diplomacy and the social duchessing, it's less of me and more of my colleagues. I'm about business development. I'm about kind of business directions. That's my thing, and that's why I'm allowed to sit in the background and live at Murrurundi and run the business.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very now to be fair, anyone check out Michael Reid Gallery. He's very innovative. He has regular catch-ups, great service, fantastic app that's really different that they've developed. Fantastic marketing. If you get on the newsletter list, you're going to get newsletters. The presentation of all of your materials and things is always first class. And so I think that's, from my observation externally.
I love a good crisis. We're actually, I'm fearful this pandemic's going to end. I need it to be more emotionally charged than it is now, because in this environment we are absolutely thriving.
Why do you think that is? Because I've had a number of people say this to me, Michael. Have said, there's a lot going on, and it seems to have. I just noticed that in the background. That was annoying me.
People are open to the new.
Yeah,
people are literally open to the new. 2 years ago, I approached this really fantastic company which I've wanted to work with for a long time at Murrurundi. Murrurundi has a very big concept store. I'm really interested in retail. That's my current focus at the moment. And I've approached this major Australian brand 2 years ago, and they were very polite and said, thanks very much, but, not for us. 2 years later, in the middle of a pandemic, it's for them, So, in fact, I have used this period of intense emotional upheaval, because literally there's not a lot of physical upheaval. I haven't, a lot of intense emotional upheaval to recalibrate what we do at Murrurundi and the concept store and the gallery, to take stock, to reinvent ourselves and to come out swinging. And I'm actually coming out swinging higher up the retail pole. I'm coming out swinging, in a whole different range of products. I've just put in an application, or about to, for a packaged liquor license.
Yeah.
I've got an on-premises license. I can serve alcohol at my cafe in Murrurundi, but now I want to actually sell packaged alcohol, and I want to send takeaway. Now, I bet you 2 years ago, 8 months ago, they would never have considered that. But now they will.
Yeah, so I think you'll get the license easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stimulate the economy. But I also think a lot of business owners are thinking about these things that otherwise, I've watched some of the restaurants who wouldn't deliver, all of a sudden can do delivery. And so the quality of food that you can get at home delivered has gone up. You're happy to pay the money.
Yep.
You might just buy a bit less if you don't want to spend as much money. But, there's this great saying that, it's a Charles Darwin saying that it's not the strong that survive, it's not the smart that survive, it's the people that are prepared to change that survive.
Adaptability. Darwin was always about adaptability, and they mistook the word adaptable and fitness.
Yeah.
He had no interest in the person who could run the furthest or the animal that could jump the highest. He was interested in the animal that genetically could change when the environment changed with it. And that's what we do. And I'm actually loving this crisis. We went online with our business starting mid last year, and now 90% of everything we do is online. 90%. We've closed the Sydney Gallery for the general public. We haven't noticed.
And look, I think that's very interesting. We were talking just before we started recording on the collector from Texas that had seen your catalogue and written to you. I think it from an Australian point of view, the opportunity to think much more globally, given what's going on, and to innovate, to take your business to be more digitally enabled and to be able to service clients better. I think that's a real opportunity, because we don't have the population here.
And it's not something you can just do in a whim. Like, the crisis came and everybody wants to go online. Well, you can't just go online.
Yeah.
It's a 6-month process of completely and utterly rebuilding your website and your platform to take that ability. And then it's a month or two of testing. And then it's all these things. You can't just turn around and say, oh, look, let's do it now. You've actually got a plan, and you've got to always think in advance. And my colleagues and I always sit down constantly and recalibrate every aspect of what we do all the time and throw out any form of sacred cow or dogma. Everything is open discussion. We've, over the last year, gone through the complete chain of what we do, from speaking to an artist in the studio right through to hanging it on your wall. And we're just now at the final point of reconfiguring our transport needs. And I'm establishing a transport business.
That you can do your own.
I've got a transport van, but we're actually thinking of starting a separate independent business, which we then, of course, become the largest client to start. Just like Amazon became the largest client of fresh foods. And in a sense, we do that so that we can work out the kinks to, in fact, launch that business onto
because it's a big issue, Michael, for when people buy a work of art, they have in mind a place to hang it, and the process of getting it from wherever it is to wherever it needs to be is quite annoying, quite complicated. And I do think it probably is a point of friction in terms of something that slows things down in your business. Now, just to wrap up, for people that are listening, I would certainly say, if you've got a spare wall and you've got an interest in art, and Michael's your guy to give a call. But who are the most exciting Australian contemporary artists that from your point of view, that excite you right now?
Well, I mean, it sounds terrible with name dropping, but many, 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 many years ago, I asked Kerry Stokes, who I think is the best collector in the country. The Packers and the Stokes, but Kerry's I don't know the man very well at all, really, at all. But I spoke to him once many years ago, and I said, Mr. Stokes, he was Mr. Stokes. I said, Mr. Stokes, how do you choose, your works for your collection? And he just looked at me and said, show me something that makes me go, wow. And I went, okay. Because he sees so much, and so much is good, but there has got to be things that actually take your breath away, that make you go, wow. It goes beyond the intellectual to the emotional, and it's the immediate. And if that is what I look for when I look for artists that we represent, or that's what I look for particularly
right now. So I think that's a great distinction. So
it's a really simple thing, isn't it?
Go, wow. Who have you got now on your books that you're representing, that I can think of some that really resonate and make you go, wow?
I think Christian Thompson is an Australian Indigenous contemporary photographer who does a body of work in which within each body of work there is one or two images which are fundamentally so good that
big 4 panels I saw down. Gallery.
And I really enjoy personally Mark Etherington, who's a really naive painter who's currently in Canada, and he's just about to do an exhibition in Berlin called Cabin Fever, which I think is quite funny. He painted a portrait of me about a year ago, and I've had a lot of artists paint portraits of me, and I've seen a lot of work in my time, but I hang it because I actually love it. It's me as an 8-year-old boy in my clothes in the Canadian snow, and there's a tenderness about it that he captures, which is the tenderness of an 8-year-old. I think it's a really beautiful thing that makes me go, wow. I like Christian, I like Mark. I'm looking at new work by Trent Park at the moment. Trent Park is a magnum photographer who actually is claimed to fame. In a sense, he grew up as a press photographer in cricket. His big area is he's a passionate follower of cricket, and he's covered cricket in Australia and internationally for many years. In fact, I think he's doing a book with some other very famous cricketers, probably people you know. I'm not very good with cricketers, but he's got a really big commercial background in terms of cricket, but his art practice is very significant and has been for a long time. And he's just doing a new body of work called Crimson Line, and it's about smoke coming out of smokestacks, creating abstractions in the sky. And for me, it resonates because actually mankind can do beautiful things. You know, even industrially, we can do things which are beautiful. And I look at that and think, I went, wow, that's really interesting, because it's the smoke coming out of a smokestack, and it's actually abstraction, and it's based in a kind of figuration, but it is actually really beautiful. And I thought, you know, we are capable of beautiful things. It's not all nature as well. So I think he's,
cool.
yeah, you know, it's very cool, actually. Yeah.
The final thing I wanted to ask you about was Art Month. You know, Kelly+Partners are involved in sponsoring Art Month that you tipped us off to. So it's Sydney Art Month. It's a festival over the month of March generally, where all the commercial galleries open up and do interesting things, hold functions and street parades and all sorts of things to try and show more art to people in Sydney. Obviously builds their business, but also, you know, and brings new people to collect and buy art and support artists, I guess is the reason that we're involved. But can you tell us the story of Art Month? How did that come into
Art Month started about 2009. About the same time I started thinking of my business in Germany, developing Germany. I mean, it was very, very obvious at the end of 2009 that the world was going to go into a long and protracted downturn. And as I decided that I had to run forward so as not to walk backwards and go into Germany and develop internationally Australian art, I and my other colleague, Vasily Kalaman, decided that we needed to actually energise the art world, that there was no need for fright, there was only capacity for us to fight, and that we had to, in fact, come together and shout out to our community how incredibly creative business is. I actually think business is very creative, and as Andy Warhol said, art is fascinating, but the business of art is really fascinating. And I actually and Vasily wanted to come out and join all the art dealers together to create a festival in Sydney to show how creative we can be. And when you take 30 or 40 art dealers and galleries, you're actually talking about probably 1,000 artists, because most galleries will represent 30 to 40 and some can represent 100. So, you know, it was this, again, it came about at a time of disruption and anxiety and fear, that if we collectively act together and actually stand up with one voice and amplify what we do, it's very powerful. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, actually, you're probably more creative than you think. People always, for example, deride the banking community. I've often heard artists and people in the art world talk about bankers. And you know what? I always turn on them. I literally turn on them and say, actually, some of the smartest, most creative people I've ever met have been in Macquarie Bank. You know, these are really creative thinkers that put their mind to finance, money, commerce.
It's a great point, Michael. Like, I think that, you know, when you consider somebody like a Steve Jobs or a Henry Ford or a Elon Musk, these guys, you know, just out of their mind's eye have created these companies that create these things that nobody had even thought of. And so it's a very interesting point you make, because I've always thought that the very great business people, it's one thing to be an asset trader, but the people that build things are generally very, very creative. You know,
extraordinary. And to think that the creative industries have a monopoly on creativity is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
And I actually think that actually, you know, most industries at their very high end are really extraordinary people and in it. And so the art industry needed to come together in 2010, just as I needed to go overseas to create energy, because my other very simple business proposition is that money is energy. That is all that money is. The more energy that you create in your world, the money will gravitate towards you like a magnetic attraction. You create your own business. You create your own luck. And I guess through things like moving to Germany and extending Australian art outside of Australia and extending me and extending ourselves through Art Month, you know, we create energy, and in terms that amplification feeds back into us by people who are attracted by our energy. And really simple proposition. Business is incredibly creative, but it's not necessarily complex.
Yeah, that's a great place to end. I really want to thank Michael for his time today. I've always enjoyed sitting down and having a chat with Michael or any interaction. I absolutely recommend and commend him to anyone that's considering buying any type of art. One of the greatest things, to have around you are people that share your passion and are thoughtful and interesting. And Michael's definitely that. You send him a text message anytime, day or night, with a photo of a painting anywhere in the world, and you'll get an encyclopedic response. And so, Michael, I really want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a great excuse for a chat, and I hope it really helps our clients to think about their business. There's some great lines in there. I've written some notes here. Run forward in order not to walk backwards. Art is fascinating, but the business of art is even more fascinating. And where we've ended, which is so often the case, the energy that you put out into the world is often what you get back. So, Michael, thanks so much, mate.
Have a good weekend.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.